Hello, and welcome to the Constellations Conference Chit Chat with some of our speakers, 2015 North American Systemic Constellations Conference. And today with me I have Ed Tick. And Ed will be doing two talks on Saturday, November 14th from 9 to 10 a.m., Transforming the Wounds of War in Individuals, Families, and Nations. And then in the afternoon from 2 to 5 with John Becknell, Restoring the Soul After War, a mini retreat. So welcome, Ed.
Thank you very much, Linda. Honored to be with you and all of our good healer friends.
Yes, this is exciting. So I've written out just a couple of questions, and of course most of our talk would be about your talks coming up for the conference. So I'm wondering, how have you seen the family system affected by war?
Well, that's an important question because the public tends to think of the war veteran as the person needing help and also the person with, in quotes, an individual condition or pathology that needs to be treated. And we too often leave out the entire family constellation, the family system. And beyond that, we don't consider the entire social system of which the veteran and family are part. So I'd actually like to address them all. So what we know and is clear and in epidemic proportions is that all of the psychological and social ills that anyone suffers, and we're all concerned about, troubled marriages and families, divorce rates, child abuse, substance abuse, sleep disorders, acting out and violence in the home or in the community. We're concerned about all of these issues in our families and social systems, of course, and all these issues occur in at least 2 to 3 times the proportion in military and veteran families as they do in the mainstream. So, I'm a child of a veteran, and my father had post-traumatic stress disorder. And he was not overseas; he was stateside. My uncle, my mother's only sibling, was a medic at the Battle of the Bulge, and he came home with severe PTSD, and it rippled through our entire family. Part of the reason I do this work is because of what I inherited from my family. I'm also Jewish, and so in my tribe, in my constellation, violence due to severe oppression through the millennia has been part of our social system. And so all systems that experience violent trauma experience that as spreading through the system. And I have, for the acronym PTSD, instead of post-traumatic stress disorder, I have 2 alternative translations. One is post-traumatic soul distress, to emphasize the holistic and complex nature of the wound, and that it's not just a nervous disorder, an anxiety condition, as was the previous diagnosis, but rather it affects us on every level: body, mind, heart, spirit, family, community, search for meaning, everything. In addition to that, I also call it post-traumatic social disorder, because several reasons. One is whenever a society, this is not about an American society in particular, though we contribute to it to a terrible extent, but it's true for any culture. When a culture is at war and uses its resources for destruction rather than for construction, creation, and preservation, that is a social disorder, and everybody will be traumatized by that. Secondly, there is a terrible divorce, and our question indicates this, between the veteran and the family members, thinking that it's only the vet afflicted, when in fact it's everybody. And third, and we want our conference to help overcome this, there is a terrible chasm that exists between the veteran and civilian populations, so that in traditional societies, they took care of each other. In our modern form of society, they don't take care of each other. the veterans are sent all, or the troops are sent all over the world, supposedly to protect us. And of course, that's profoundly questionable. I said it politely. And then when they come home in the States and in your country, in Canada, we turn our wounded warriors over to a professional veteran system. And the community, the family, the general society is not involved in their healing. And so we are leaving them isolated. We're transferring the burden of war pain and responsibility to them. And in that transfer, they inevitably collapse. And we're giving everybody else what they think is a free ride by not educating them into the realities of military service and combat and what it does, and asking civilians who were served and protected to return their reciprocal responsibility and tend their warriors upon homecoming. So for all of these reasons, it is a systemic problem. Everyone is affected, everyone is afflicted. And back to the family. Let's just imagine when a veteran wakes up in the middle of the night screaming from nightmares and maybe choking his spouse in bed, not knowing what he's doing. Do we think the spouse and the children don't know it and aren't scared and secondary violence and secondary trauma as well? It's impossible. Nobody comes out clean. And so we need to do our work on the systemic level.
Oh my gosh, yes. Wow. Do you have an idea, an unplanned question here, do you have an idea approximately how many people come back with PTSD?
Yeah, I can give the contemporary statistics in the United States. I don't know what they are in Canada, but accepted statistics in the United States are that 20% of the active duty troops and 40% of National Guard and reservists come back with PTSD.
Wow.
And the statistics are higher among the Guard and Reserve because they don't return to military bases. They go back into the community, and our military bases do sometimes provide some degree of support or at least belonging and familiarity. And active duty people do expect that they're going to be in the combat zone and exposed to severe violence, whereas the National Guard and reservists didn't want that, didn't think they would be exposed, expected to just be home front service or servants, or in your country, peacekeepers,
Right.
not combatants.
Right.
And so whenever the expectations of the service member are different than the reality that they're given, and they're given a much more violent reality, and they experience that they were perhaps misled or lied to. I thought I was going to be serving on North America, and that's what I signed up and I was willing to do. So there's also the trauma of betrayal. You're sending me to do something I didn't sign up for, I don't want, maybe I don't believe in, and I'm really not prepared for. Now, one last comment about the statistics is that we all know this as healers, they are always lower than the actual numbers.
I was going to say,
Always.
how can someone come back without that feeling of betrayal? Amazing.
Can't. One of the mistakes that contemporary society is making and the military is promulgating is that we can actually go to war and come back and not be morally injured or traumatized by it. And in fact, that's impossible. A much wiser approach, and all of us who are healers can help teach the public this, is that if you go to war, you will inevitably be traumatized, even if it is a so-called good war, and even if you believe your service was critical, necessary to protect your home, family, and country. War, and especially modern technological warfare, is so overwhelmingly violent, immoral, confusing, that we really should say that and there's research on this too, the only personality type, according to psychological research, that can go through a combat zone and come back unchanged is a psychopathic or sociopathic personality, because it's normal for them. That's how their minds are operating. the rest of us will be inevitably changed and transformed, and we will take traumatic wounds from the service. So the better way to think is that everybody's traumatized, but we need to treat it well, respond well, and evaluate how much, but not whether they are.
Wow. Okay. Now, also perhaps this might lead into your talk. I'm fascinated by the conception that you also use, that experiential work is so important for healing. Could you expand on that?
Sure, and thank you. And we both believe in it, and most of the people coming to our conference believe in experiential work. So one thing I'll say, that here in the States, the official therapies that the VA uses actually avoid and discourage experiential work.
Wow.
Behavioral and cognitive behavioral therapy is the dominant mode in our official systems, which tries to help people think differently about the pain they're carrying and the wounds they have, but doesn't go down inside, doesn't deal with deep, difficult emotions like shame and guilt, and tries to help people think in different ways to really to avoid the cesspool that's inside. So as holistic healers, all of us concerned about the impact on the body, the mind, the heart, and the spirit, and the community, our systems, we know that violence affects and transforms every aspect of our being and will impact us on all of those levels. Trauma does embed in the body. Trauma changes the heart, as well as the way we think, and as well as our brain chemistry. And so it is critical that we not only talk and think and analyze these issues, that's only one step, but that we do experiential work and actually, through our healing efforts, draw up and draw out the accumulated pain and the dysfunctional patterns that we've developed. And thinking about that doesn't achieve it. We have to do the experiential work. We have to dig down to the original wound that we're still carrying and release the old poisons that are in us from that wounding.
Stop playing with Band-Aids to try and heal this type of wound, right?
Exactly. And I think we could probably agree on this and add that unless it's an absolute necessary life-saving circumstances, most of our use of pharmaceuticals are also Band-Aids.
Yeah.
They're controlling and suppressing the symptoms. They're not bringing healing. And the survivor ends up being dependent on the medications just to adapt and adjust, and healing hasn't occurred. So, right, let's stop using Band-Aids.
Wow. Okay. Well, tell us what you're planning for these talks.
Well, I'll start with the second one first, because we just discussed experiential work. So the second one will not be a talk. I'm very grateful to the conference for giving us 3 hours. My co-presenter, John Becknell, is a close colleague of mine, happens to live in San Diego, so this is convenient. But he was the chairman of the board of my nonprofit Soldier's Heart, and he's very experienced. He's also an international expert in first responder teams and working with their trauma. So we come to this together. And that second session, we do have 3 hours, and it will be experiential. We're calling it a mini retreat, so that all the participants, we can go into our bodies and into our hearts and into our spirits, through guided exercises and meditations. It will be primarily experiential, and we will all work together to achieve healing from war and the military experience as a group. In my first talk, which will be a talk since it's a keynote address, I will focus very much on a bit of what we've shared, but I'll expand the way that we call PTSD, the way we can understand it as a holistic wound to all of us and to our constellations, to our social bodies, and that if when we treat it as an individual wound and locate the wound in the survivor, we're actually increasing his or her wounding, reinforcing that the problem is you and you have to be fixed rather than the problem is all of us. We're avoiding our social responsibility for how our military is being used. We're pretending that the rest of us aren't involved, even though we're paying the bills and it's all being done in our names. And we're causing more collapse because we're making our surviving veterans and their families carry the wound and all of its consequences themselves. So rather than thinking that way, my keynote will be focusing on the degree to which military service and war and its healing are all part of our collective systemic responsibility, and we really need to develop military and war literacy and make it one of our first concerns for everybody to be involved in healing rather than leave it off to the side for the veterans and military and their specialists. So I hope to break all of our shared awareness out into the systemic dimension of military service and warfare, and understanding that what we call PTSD and how we treat it as an individual wound and pathology is really wrong. It's actually part of the problem.
Wow. Yes, I can see that this is society.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a wound to all of us.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Ed. I really appreciate your time. I look forward to meeting you at the conference. And we'll be putting this little video on a couple of different sites, but I'll also send you a link.
Okay, great. And we will send it out to our whole mailing list as well.
Okay.
I end with a really quick story about our shared responsibility. This is a great story, and it really puts us back into the systemic perspective. So at one of my intensive Soldier's Heart healing retreats, they're usually 4 days long. And of course, many veterans and family members come, but also active duty military attend. And so one of the retreats, we had a chaplain who was present at the retreat in uniform. He got relief time so he could attend because he was preparing for his deployment to Afghanistan. At our closing circle, the rest of the group, civilians and veterans, all said to the chaplain, "Please take care of yourself while you're in the sandbox. We need you. We want you to come back." The chaplain looked deeply into everybody's eyes and he said, "I can't take care of myself in Afghanistan. I'm a chaplain. My duty is to take care of our soldiers. That's why I'm going. That's why I'm willing to go even though I'm against this war. I've got to take care of our soldiers. If you're and he looked at all of us deeply into the eyes, into our hearts, and said, if you're concerned about me and my well-being and the well-being of all of our troops, then get involved. I can't take care of them. You have to take care of us. If you don't like how we're using, get politically involved and make a difference. Get involved as we return home. Help us and support us really during deployment, not with pretty signs and yellow ribbons, but really seriously get involved because we can't do this for ourselves." And he's right, and it's true. And actually, in both Canada and the US, the military does have a more positive attitude towards the civilian world than in the past. And they are both, in both countries, asking for military-civilian partnerships so that we all get involved in taking care of our warriors. Again, whether or not we agree with how they're being used politically. The military wants us to take responsibility, not the politicians and corporations, for how they're being used, and all of us to take responsibility for their healing and homecoming. So this is a huge systemic issue. And the troops are trying to tell us that, and the PTSD wound and the way it screams to us at an epidemic level is also trying to say that.
Wow. Yeah. Good point. Good story.
Yeah, thank you.
More than story.
Yeah. call to action for all of us.
Wow. Well, we'll publish it and we'll be on your side.
I know, I feel that strongly. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Look forward to meeting you at the conference.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.